Hi, I'm Mark Hartman with James River Armory. 25 years ago, I founded a small business and we specialized in Civil War muskets. We would take the European imports, we would essentially make them historically accurate. A lot of them, we would also send the rifle barrels out and have them correctly rifled. And trying to get a very good period correct piece, we became a main supplier to the reenactment community and probably the top supplier of kind of competition grades to the North-South Skirmish Association. What I found with these guys is we come out here about once a month on a Saturday just to have some fun, enjoy shooting. And I started bringing the Civil War muskets out. And the guys here had never fired these things before. And what would happen is within 15-20 minutes, all anybody would want to shoot is the Civil War musket. Now we had everything from M4s, M14s, we've had Galils, Mausers, and a lot of historical guns, but literally within 15 minutes, everybody is shooting the musket. So what I'm going to do today, we're going to go do a couple of things. Part of our motto is experience the history. I'm fascinated by both history. I guess they think I'm an amateur historian. I'm also fascinated with the kind of the manufacturing technology. Firearms technology development essentially drove most of industry. You know, the concept of, you know, if you build a better rifle or musket, your country will survive. So what was developed in the firearms industry would spread out throughout, from agricultural implements to sewing machines. Everything would start. Woodworking technology, the developments of steels, and you started a revolution with these things in the 1830s. All right, now we're going to go over to the table. I'm going to get these guys to take a break. I'm going to go over to the table and I'll show you, go through some of what we're going to do. Main thing, we're going to show you how to safely shoot these, try to get rid of some of the Hollywood misperceptions on how to load them. And then we're going to do a little historical interpretation, I guess you would call it, where we're going to compare the various technologies that were available in the Civil War and show kind of the impact and the effect that they would have. So, all right, guys, hold up. We've taken a break from shooting for a few minutes. We'll go over a little history of what was available when the Civil War started. You know, if it's think of it, it's 1861 right now. The guys here have heard, if they work around me, they get history lessons on a daily basis with what's going on. All right, the first rifle we're going to show you is, this is an 1816 flintlock musket. Basically, this gun is a derivative of the French Charleville, and firearms technology by this point, the flintlock was developed probably mid-1600s, and nothing had really changed for almost 200 years. If you look at a 17th century musket, it's really the only difference might be the shape of the stock, the length of the barrel, and the bands, and the way they hold it. But there is no difference between a musket for almost 200 years. All right, in the 1830s, a dentist developed a percussion cap. I have not figured out why a dentist was playing with fulminate of mercury. I don't know, maybe he was looking for the world's quickest root canal. All right, but anyway, he developed the percussion cap. What that did, it took off in the sporting arms. It gave you an instantaneous ignition. With a flintlock, and you'll see that as we shoot some of these, the spark is hitting powder in a pan, which is igniting the main charge in the barrel. And there's a bit of a delay, and it gets a little frustrating sometimes. You'll see our ability to hit targets. A couple of these guys kind of like them, I don't. I've got some left-handed guys. If we wanted like a blooper video, we'll let them shoot it. But anyway, the percussion cap has come onto its own, and essentially they took the 1816. The last version of the U.S. flintlock was the 1840, and then in 1842 they essentially went to the percussion, the bolster, and the percussion lock. Everything else, the barrel, we're still in 69 caliber. U.S. arms up to that point, we were following the French 69 caliber round balls. They had been around for, again, almost 200 years. By the Civil War, they were loading cartridges. They would have a round ball. They would have 3 buckshot, figuring it would increase the hit probability. Okay, what's now happening? You've gone to the smoothbore musket, and a little side note, and it's something as we do videos, I'll go over more and more. The senior leadership. At that time, it was Winfield Scott, called Old Fuss and Feathers. He kind of resisted technology, and when the U.S. went in for the Mexican-American War, he basically refused to allow the brand new 1842s to go along, insisting on having flintlock muskets because that is what he knew. We're going to see things like that happen a lot with the involving technology. All right, at the same time, we have muskets, smoothbore muskets. The U.S. was particular, the rest of the world, starting in the Revolutionary War, the concept of the American rifleman. Basically, 1770s, 1780, most guys are subsistence farmers. If you don't have a rifle, you're not going to eat. So the Americans were known for their marksmanship skills. The U.S. Armory, starting in 1803, issued certain select units rifles. The 1803 pattern, the 1817 pattern, then you went to the first percussion, the 1841 Mississippi. These were all loaded with a tight-fitting round ball and a patch. The disadvantage of a rifle is after the first 2 shots, it is very difficult to load. You almost have to stop what you're doing and clean it. Accuracy with a round ball rifling, you probably had 200-yard accuracy. But late 1840s, a Frenchman named Manet developed, I don't know if you can see this, basically developed a conical projectile with a hollow base. And what that did is you now had the speed loading capability of the round ball. A 69 caliber musket took about a 66, 67 diameter ball. Now you've dropped down to 58 caliber. You cut this about 4 to 5 thou smaller. It loads easy, but what would happen with the expanding base is as the charge ignited, and this has to be soft lead, it would expand the base of the mini ball into the rifling. Now the type of rifling they used during the Civil War, the main was a 3-groove progressive depth. If you ever look from the breech end of one of the barrels, in the breech end that rifling is 15 to 18 thou deep. When it gets to the muzzle end, it's only at about 5 thousandths deep. So you almost have a choke effect as that round is going up the barrel. The rifling is the tapering rifling is essentially holding and grabbing that ball. Incredible accuracy for the period, and that would have some devastating effects on the battlefield. As we get into our loading lesson, during the Civil War, they issued cartridges. They were made of paper. You had they would essentially put a charge in. Civil War main charges were 65 grains of 2F black powder. For target shooting, we dropped that down to about 48 grains, basically 66 grains, 65 grains. It'll beat you up, and there's no need for it to be that heavy. We're not shooting unless you're shooting 500 yards or something like that. This is actually my favorite civil. It's a reproduction. Probably built this 15, 18 years ago. It's been kind of a gun I always like to bring out to the range. This is actually a rifle. Rifles have 2 bands. Muskets have 3. certain units would be issued the muskets. The problem is the concept of the rifle versus the musket became obsolete with the rifled musket. There is no difference in performance between a 40-inch barrel and a 33-inch barrel. Absolutely none. The muskets tend to have triangle bayonets. The rifles, you'll have a stud here for like a long sword type of bayonet. But to load these, we've been firing them, but I'll go through. The first thing you do, and a bunch of companies make these, I don't know if we can see them, they're winged musket caps. They're pretty much an exact copy of the Civil War musket cap. Difference being it's not fulminate of mercury, it's non-corrosive, so you won't ruin your rifles. Basically, before you do anything, you want to, we call it snap caps. And we're looking for a puff of air coming down. It happens more often than you know. The last time you cleaned the gun, you haven't shot it in 2 years, you cleaned it, you accidentally left a patch in there. And you want to make sure the throat in the barrel is clear. So we've determined that that is clear. All right, leave the last cap on there when you're done. What you're doing now is you're preventing air from being drawn in. Black powder is exceptionally susceptible to sparks or slightly burning embers. It spontaneously ignites at 400 degrees. The slightest spark will set it off. So you want to be careful. All right, to load, I'll go over the cartridge again. We didn't come up with this idea. This I learned from the North-South skirmish. And it's essentially a plastic tube designed to be a bolt protector, but it works perfect. No desire to roll paper cartridges, and it sure beats having to measure a charge every time you want to shoot it. So we have these available. All right, about 48 grains of powder. They go in the system. The ball. Now, what you don't want to do, just to be on the safe side, you don't want to thumb the ball. If something happens, you'd like to keep all the parts of your hand. All right, the same with the ramrod. Don't put your hand over the end. You want to try to just make sure nothing happens. So, you know, this thing's been fired several rounds. I'm not replacing the ramrod when we shoot target shooting. It takes too long. When you start doing this, recognize the average Civil War soldier had to be able to shoot 3 shots in a minute. So you got to be in shape. You got to have a lot of practice. Now, the next thing I want to point out, I'll pull one of these cartridges apart. The real secret on the mini ball is the grease. If you can, I don't know how well you can see. All right, it's gone in the tube and then it's been dipped in a mini barrel lube. We use the original lube, which is about 70% tallow with a 30% beeswax. The pure tallow is just too, yeah, I mean, it'll work, but you'll really be a mess. The beeswax kind of holds it together. That was the original formula, but it is critical. What this does is it keeps the fouling soft. If you try to fire a mini ball without being greased, you might get 3 shots out. Black powder is very dirty. You can see just shooting a few shots what's happening to me. But it just cakes inside the barrel, and you'll start to see after a few rounds it's getting harder and harder to get the mini ball down. Proper grease, the fouling from the powder stays soft, and you won't have a problem. We've routinely shot 40 or 50 shots without having to clean the rifle, and it works well every time. One final thing on this, and you see it from Hollywood in the movies. You would take the original cartridge, you would grab the bullet with your teeth, put the powder, and then they would show you loading paper in the gun. Do not load paper in the barrel. It has the effect of, it burns, it increases the fouling exponentially. You load a couple patches of paper in there, you're not going to get your 3rd shot down the barrel. Second, it also can leave burning embers, and I saw somebody do this. He fired the gun, he didn't want to listen, but he poured the powder down the barrel, before he could move, the charge went off. He had a cowboy hat and it blew the hat off his head. So he was lucky he hadn't gotten much further. But it does happen. The second reason you don't want to, especially if it were dry out here, you're throwing burning paper out into the field. So you'd rather not start a forest fire. But do not, under any circumstances, load wadding, paper, or anything else down one of these. It just creates too much of a mess. Okay, let's cut. Okay, we've loaded the musket, and now we're walking over here in a safer area. We're going to go ahead and cap it. We'll show you a little close-up on this in a bit. Ready?
Okay.
All right, I'm going to load one more round. Just remember, pull the mini ball, pour the powder down the barrel. Don't thumb the mini ball, and hold essentially you want to hold the ramrod so that if something happens, the ramrod doesn't go through your hand. So you can, all right. We still have the old cap on here. That's preventing air from getting sucked into the chamber. Get rid of the old cap. Basically, the caps get kind of smashed apart when you're firing, so they're usually just flick them right off. All ready? All right, that concludes the musket side. Now, hey, Aaron, can you bring me over the flintlock? All right, now we're going to go shoot the flintlock. Aaron, you want to bring me up? Let me grab that, and you take this. All right, what I have here is an original 1816. It's in real nice shape. We've shot it a fair amount. It's about my least favorite gun to shoot. All right, first thing, you don't have the ability to snap caps. So I take a little tool, make sure the priming hole is clear. Here, let me have the flask. All right, the original cartridge for this model basically contained 80 grains of powder. The way that was supposed to be fired, you bit the end off, you primed the frizzen, locked everything back, and then you dumped the balance of the powder in the barrel with the ball. I'm not a big fan of having something already primed when I'm loading. Also, what happened is, you know, with that 80 grain charge, once they went to smoothbores, they didn't change the charge, so you ended up with a heck of a lot of power in this thing. All right, our cartridge, this is something we kind of made up. Basically a vinyl tube with a mini ball, with a round ball. The round ball is coated in grease, so we essentially wrap it in wax paper so all the powder doesn't stick to it. Don't load the paper, please. All right. I usually try, there'll always be like a screw hole in the ball. Try to put that up. All right. Keep that at half cock. All right. I'll usually tap it a little bit to make sure. Full cock. And that's called a flash in the pan. At that point, you reprime. All right, you notice the delay. Some guys can handle this. Boy, I can't hit anything with these. That flash in your face and that delay fire, I can hit the berm. That's about it. I got a couple guys here that like them and they do well with them. But that is on the flintlock. One final thing on the flintlock is these flints were essentially disposable. They tend to break and they'll chip. You know, if you got 10 to 20 shots out of a flint, you were doing well. But I've seen them where 2 shots and they broke in half, and then you got to stop what you're doing and put a new flint in the musket. So you've got some work with, you know, when you're working with this thing. You can see where once they went to percussion, how much easier and more accurate that rifle or musket actually became to fire. Okay, our next living history moment, we're competing with the rifled musket in 58 caliber versus the smoothbore in 69 caliber. Over the years, I would have to say Aaron is probably the best shooter that's out here, so I've given him the smoothbore. If anybody can hit that target consistently, it's Aaron. We're all going to do, a minute, three rounds, guys. All right, we'll do 3 rounds. And then what we're going to do is take those silhouette targets back to 100 yards and see how we do. All right, you guys ready? On the firing line, load! Track your hits, guys. All right, I guess you can commence firing. All right, cease fire, cease fire. All right, go ahead, guys. I need to take those 4 silhouette targets out to 100 yards, and we're going to do it again. Okay, we have moved our targets back to the 100-yard line. Kind of reset our little skirmish line here. And we're going to be testing the smoothbore against the rifled musket. Now, guys, understand you've got about a 1 foot, 6 inches to a foot drop between your 50-yard 0 and your 100. The mini ball is dropping that far. What you had with the mini ball in the rifled musket is the main gun, the sights were graduated out to 500 yards. And they are actually accurate at 500 yards. The rifles, like the 1855 I had, that would take it out to almost 800 yards. I want to see what percentage of hits. We were almost 100% at 50. Let's see what the percentage. Aaron with the smoothbore, basically he's spitting out the knuckleball from hell. There's no spin on that bullet. It's moving at about 1,100 feet per second, and it does whatever it wants to do. All right, guys, you ready? Load. All right, no hits on that volley. All right, here's 1, 2. Okay, as you can see, the hit percentage started going down with the rifled musket. We still, what, about 50%? So we're about 50%. We're exactly 0% with the smoothbore. If you think about tactics of today, you basically march troops in a line, tightly packed, the flag in the center, the bugle telling them which direction to go. And they would start, if this were a battlefield, they'd be starting hundreds of yards back. And basically they would march up to about 50 yards of the enemy, fix their bayonets, fire a volley, and then charge into the enemy. Now you've created individual rifle where you can start affecting the line 400 and 500 yards out. So you start with your line of troops marching forward. By the time you got to 50 yards, you didn't have a whole lot of guys left. And heaven help the poor guy carrying the flag, because he became the premier target. The flag bearer was the guy that centered the unit, so he was the preferred target, followed very closely by the officers leading the unit. Casualties in the Civil War, if you look at historic battles, they take from the American Revolution, you see horrible casualties at Saratoga. But then you go to the American Civil War. I would say the Battle of Manassas was still fought mainly with smoothbores. I mean, the casualties shocked the nation at the time, but literally a year later at Antietam, it's turned into a total slaughter.
All right. Okay, we're back from the range. We're at James River, the front of our facility here. I wanted to go over a couple things. First of all, the flintlock again, we kind of glossed over some areas out at the range. It's actually my least favorite firearm to shoot, but let's go over the terminology. Okay, this is the lock, this whole area here. On the lock is a pan. The pan is where you put your priming powder. There's a small hole, I don't know if you can see this, a small hole that goes into the breech that would allow the powder to ignite the main charge. The breech section at this point is probably a 1/4 inch thick, maybe a little bit more. So it's asking a lot. It's got to travel up a small hole over a 1/4 of an inch. All right, so this is the frizzen. It's basically what your flint strikes and creates sparks. We'll do that here just to see the sparking action. Okay, that little bit of spark ignites the powder. As you saw with the one video, you get the term flash in a pan, because it doesn't always ignite the main charge. That's where you really develop the flinch. Okay, that's a quick and dirty on the flintlock. I want to reiterate safety again. I mean, here's our modern day Civil War cartridge. Okay, the mini ball, always hold it between your thumb and forefinger. Okay, you can shoot these things and never ever have an accident, but always remember in the back of your mind that things can go wrong. Never thumb the ball as you're trying to load it. I don't know if you can see that. You know, just gently place it in the muzzle, push it in a little bit, and then let the ramrod do the work. Also with the ramrod, I'll pull one out. You don't ever want to get your hand over the end. Again, something goes wrong, there's a small spark left in the chamber, you end up with the ramrod run through your hand. Accidents are very rare with these. You know, I'm trying to just go over safety, because what we have found with the guys here and friends, if people come down to visit us, we always will take them over to our range and let them shoot a variety of stuff. People love these things. They're a bit of a challenge. It's all offhand. I mean, you can shoot for an hour and a half, and you'll be worn out. Also, it's relatively cheap, especially with the cost of modern ammunition to fire these. All right, I want to go over a little bit. It's been probably a dozen years since we were producing these models. Our main supplier was a company called Euro Arms. They went out of business in 2010. They produce some pretty good parts. We would basically get a basic musket, and we would do a lot of the polishing, a lot of the rifles. We would send up to Hoyt Machine Shop and have the rifling recut, or at times they would send them in smoothbore, and we would just have Hoyt cut the rifling. We did two variations. Oh, they're okay. This model here, it's an 1855. This is essentially a pure Euro Arms model. We were actually making the lock plates to do the 55. We were getting the rear sights, and this was designed for the reenactor community, to give them historically accurate. The Italians were horrible, in my opinion, about making thick club-like stocks. We would get the stock contoured to match the original. So there's a fair amount of these around. My favorite is the skirmish guns. And let's go back over here. We became a major supplier in the early 2000s to the North-South skirmish. Essentially, we would use rifles. This is an example. This was actually a Richmond rifle. Richmond would take captured arms and they would reissue them. This was designed, they cut it to a 33-inch barrel length. It was designed for mounted infantry. These rifles became very popular in the Petersburg campaign. They were a little shorter, quicker to load, every bit as accurate, but you would see a lot of these in the trenches in Petersburg. What I want to do real quick, I'm going to give a plug out to the North-South Skirmish Association. Website is n-ssa.org. I got involved in shooting there probably 25 years ago. I loved it. I've been shooting high power for years, but everything was like a breakable target. Clay pigeons, flower pots, you name it, milk jugs full of water at 100 yards. It was team shooting, period correct, some great guys. It would be like time fire. You'd have an 8-man musket team, and you'd have 40 clay pigeons on a board. How quick does your team break all the pigeons? I got into that. That's how I ended up coming up with some of the muskets, because I went out there with an Army sport and couldn't figure out why I couldn't hit anything, and I learned a lot from the guys there. All right, what is available now? A lot of this stuff was very popular in the, I'd say the 80s, the 90s, especially when black powder hunting season came out. Euroarms did incredibly well. What happened, the development of the inline, the Pyrodex, the powders like that basically took the traditional musket out of the black powder hunting season and kind of put these back in the closet. I mean, let's be realistic. Some of the inline rifles I've seen have, modern ballistics, copper jacketed bullets. Coming from some of the states where you can only use a shotgun for deer hunting, you have better luck with the black powder season, because you've got a more accurate firearm to hunt with. The traditional inlines have basically put these back where there just wasn't a lot of interest in them. What we're finding, essentially the World War II generation collected the Civil War stuff, and I guess if you look at their age, they probably knew their grandfather, their great-grandfather had fought in the Civil War. They had family history in the Civil War. Back then they were cheap. Basically, when the Civil War ended, by 1865, everything we had issued was obsolete. The 50s, 70s were coming in. You were only a few years from Hugo Mauser developing the first Mauser bolt-action gun. In the 1870s, you couldn't give these things away. I know we sent a bunch of arms to help France in the Franco-Prussian War. I don't think they really appreciated it, because they were just so outgunned by the first generation Mauser. What happened? I mean, tens of thousands of these things went out in the surplus market. They were $1 or $2 a piece. They turned them into shotguns. They would cut them down to a 30-inch. They would cut off the stock. It's typical of what you'll see once a military gun becomes obsolete. They have to find a market for it, and as such, they're trying to find them in good shape and original shape is not all that easy. They're out there now. It's actually, the prices come down. I've been kind of surprised lately watching the prices come down. Some guns should not be fired. I've seen them where, 100 years ago somebody loaded it up, it didn't go off, it got thrown in the corner, and it sat around for 100 years. When that happens, it essentially rots the breech out. The priming back then, the mercuric chroming priming, was incredibly corrosive to the metal. You'll actually find the flintlocks in better shape than you will the percussion models, because you didn't have the mercuric priming used with these things. The originals, if they have good rifling, the breech area isn't heavily pitted, they're usually fine to shoot. And what I found with them, and the guys have here, is we take them out, they're usually dead on. There's not a whole lot of sighting in. There's no windage adjustment. There's no, elevation adjustment other than a small rear sight. We haven't quite, in the firearms world, we haven't quite refined the sighting to the point that it would be a generation later. Reproductions, right now, you've got Army Sport. There doesn't seem to be a lot on the market. I guess COVID had really slowed them down in Italy. Petter Soli, and I've seen his stuff. They're probably the finest reproductions on the market right now. They're not cheap, but they are a very high quality reproduction. You can find the originals in good shape. I mean, your auctions, Gunbroker, you don't usually see them very often in the stores. Most gun dealers won't even touch these things. But they're reasonably priced. Now, what we've done, and it's something we've done for years for kind of our old customers, we haven't really pushed it at all. At our store here, we do have most of what you need to get involved in the shooting. It's not a big item with us. We've been running cartridges for friends of ours that basically don't have the ability to cast lead or the time to do it. So we have cartridges available. We also have mini balls available. Limited supply, musket caps. Company called Schutzen it's a German company. They've really done a great job of supplying stuff we need to shoot these. I tend to use their powder, their 2F powder. It's been great. It's as black powder goes, it's fairly clean, and the price is right. You've got Goax also makes decent powder, and I guess the premier powder is the Swiss powder, but for the extra $10 a pound that the Swiss is, I'll stick with the Schutzen. My interest in these type of firearms is purely my love of history. I guess it goes back to my father and my family. Probably by the time I was 12, we had visited every battlefield on the East Coast and every fort. And then on my mom's side, my great uncle would talk about, he was kind of the keeper of the family history, but my grandmother's grandmother had 3 brothers. Being from the Baltimore area, one went north, one went south, and the 3rd brother ended up in the Navy. None of them ever came home. From what they said, the brother that went south was killed in some battle in central Virginia. The brother that was fighting for the north was actually a part of the Baltimore militia. The family had said that he was killed at Antietam. Trying to do the research, it looks more like it was when they were coming around in 1864 to try to flank Washington. Interesting story there is the Baltimore militia is mobilized. They're being sent to Western Maryland. The family dog went along, and 2 weeks after the battle, the dog made it back to Baltimore. He was out near Frederick when that happened. The 3rd brother joined the Navy. Apparently, he never made it back either. Some of those guys, especially in Wilmington, used as landing parties at Fort Fisher. They took some horrendous casualties. So you have a family history of mother losing all 3 of her sons. I mean, it happened. Tragedies like that were very common when you look at the casualty rates of the Civil War. All right, we're gonna wrap it up here. I hope everybody's enjoyed this. Learn how to shoot it. These things are a lot of fun. They're a lot of fun. I started my kids doing it. My daughter loved it to the point where I think when she was 16, I built her own musket. Now she's much older and married, and when she comes home, all she asks is if her musket's still there, can we take it to the range? And she's very proud that she outshoots her husband, who is an Army captain. But thank you. I hope you enjoy that. Look up N-SSA. If you ever have a weekend where they're shooting, it's a lot. You can really learn a lot there. Thank you.